I will always say this at the beginning of every session that I do. Tennessee has a huge place in my heart since I left the 911 center. And the reason for that is Tennessee was the first place that I did a presentation for Rapid SOS after leaving the center. And, you guys have always been so extremely welcoming. So I appreciate any time I get asked to come speak for you guys. So this session is a little bit different. Some folks may have seen part of this at the Tennessee Winter Workshop. I am always updating and changing up my presentations, but this particular presentation is getting lots of really good feedback because the topic I'm going to talk about is really important. And a lot of my sessions, my personal sessions, have to do with my experience and how I learned from them, how I grew from them, how important it was to put tools in my toolbox, etc. So the title of this session is, If They Are the Problem, Why Do I Have to Change? And for those that don't know me, my name is Tracy Eldridge, and I am the Community Engagement Manager on the public safety side for Rapid SOS. I have a few sessions here this week. So this session is actually a two-part session. So tomorrow morning, I might need help on the time because that, geographically time zone challenge thing. But I think first thing tomorrow, maybe 10, I don't know. We'll figure it out. Somebody will put it in the chat. But part two of this session will be happening tomorrow. And tomorrow afternoon, I will be doing one that's more technology related for Rapid SOS. And then on Wednesday morning, I will be launching a brand new session about leadership and again, some of the important lessons that I've learned from my experiences. So let's get started. And as Matt mentioned, don't hesitate to throw any questions in the chat box. If I see them, I'll try to get to them. But again, with this new virtual world, first of all, I am an extroverted people person, and this has been extremely challenging. But I have stayed connected with many of you on a regular basis. You know who you are in the social networking world. But definitely missing that interaction socially. But definitely reach out on the questions and I'll try to get to those. So as far as the roles that I have, number one, said I was already introduced the fact that I'm the Community Engagement Manager for Rapid SOS. I'm also a recovering PSAP director. And yes, that is how I will always introduce myself. I spent 20 years in the 911 center, and my favorite job profession of all time was truly being just a dispatcher. And before you all get all squirrely because I said just a dispatcher, I truly mean being the telecommunicator that goes into the center, puts the headset on, and is able to just answer the calls and tell their responders where to go and get paid for it and truly feel like I was helping someone versus the chief dispatcher job that came with a ton of stress, hiring, firing, discipline, policies, quality assurance, all that stuff. So my favorite job of all time was when I got to be just a dispatcher. And then I'm also still a firefighter and an EMT in my community. I don't get to do that much. I tend to work a little bit too much for my big girl job, but nonetheless, I still hold all my certifications and respond when I can. And I teach for Tony Harrison in the public safety group. And as of the last couple of years, I've also received some certifications in some mental health training, as well as being a behavior advocate and learning more about human behavior and why people suck. Yeah, that's a technical term. You'll learn more about that in just a little bit. But let's go ahead and get started. So many of you know my story to an extent. In my 911 center, this is who I was. I was happy, I loved my job, and I truly wanted to do the best I could for the citizens that I provided service for the staff that I worked for, and my bosses. I gave everything I had to this profession, and that particular picture was after a 5-day blizzard that basically wiped out my 911 system. That is the 911 phone wrapped around my neck. We were playing around, but this is actually who I ended up becoming. And I know this isn't the greatest picture, but it was a picture that I stumbled upon not that long ago. And thank God for my treatment for my PTSD, because if I didn't have the treatment that I had, which was EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing, when I saw this picture, it probably would have caused some severe anxiety, and my stomach would have hurt, and I would have been anxious for the rest of the day. But I was looking for a picture that I knew was under a Google search for something that I had worked on a long time ago, and this picture popped up. And one of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to dig through all my stuff, and I'm going to find the headline in the newspaper that followed this particular meeting right here. So that man in the picture was one of our selectmen, and the gentleman that he's talking to his left is the boss that ultimately ripped off the Band-Aid for me and exposed a ton of trauma. There was a wound that was exposed that I thought had healed a long time ago. Actually, there was more than one wound, but nonetheless, he ripped off that Band-Aid and caused a lot of issues for me. Shortly before this particular meeting, my boss had turned on me. Now, when I share the story in my PTSD session, I get a little bit more into like kind of some of his behavior. But if you haven't seen the PTSD session, just understand this guy was truly an asshat. There's no other way to describe him. Before he turned on me, he was one of my biggest fans. He was extremely supportive. I trusted him. Anything and everything I asked for, I got. He valued me as an employee. And in one moment that changed. And that moment was when I stuck up for myself for something. And this meeting was actually shortly after that. And that particular night in the meeting, I was asking for something, and the headline in the newspaper, the local newspaper, stated, "Chief Dispatcher double dipping." And as I mentioned before, this profession to me means the world. So to have my name and all the hard work that I had done tarnished that way on the front of the local paper, I was devastated. And here I am trying to defend myself. And if you zoomed in, you could see the scowl on my face. That is not who I am as a person. So I think it's really important to walk through the importance before I get into kind of the nitty gritty of this presentation. It's important to walk through the process of why you need to be a good boss. Because when you don't, there's lots of things that have a ripple effect that you could ultimately be responsible for. So as I left my 911 center and joined the team at Rapid SOS almost 4 years ago, which is crazy to me. It has gone by so fast. The folks at APCO had reached out to me and asked if I would do a presentation on leaving the ECC for the private sector. And I said I totally could do that presentation. And one of the things that I did as I prepared for that session was to do a survey, and I sent it out on Facebook, and many of you on here answered some of those questions for me, and I'm truly appreciative. So the reason I sent the particular survey out was to get specific information and kind of validate what I thought anyway. So one of the first questions, so basically the folks that would fill it out was, if you have left the 911 center, or are you thinking of leaving the 911 center? So that was the condition. If you were happy and content in your job and you weren't planning on going anywhere, please don't fill it out because it doesn't make sense. So if you committed to answering the questions, one of the first questions was, what was or is the reason you left or want to leave? And I was actually, I was surprised because I had a feeling I knew the results, but they were a little bit different, but I want to point it out in a different way. So the different, the different choices that they had: 1, difficulty with leadership. That's that purple section. 2, PTSD and burnout. 3, no advancement opportunities. 4, financial. And then D, all of the above. And then there was this other section, as well as a pretty decent section, a smaller section on retirement that was specific to retirement. In that other section, I sorted through all of those. And basically what happened in that other section was folks identified leadership and PTSD, or leadership and financial, but at the end of the day, even just 2 of those sections, so first, D, all of the above, was the highest, and leadership was in there, right? So at least 29% there either left or wanted to leave because of leadership. And then 24% actually left or wanted to leave specifically because of leadership. And that's 53% of the 380 people that filled that out. That's sad to me. The fact that people want to leave, and we know that these studies exist, that the majority of people, they don't leave the job, they leave their boss or the people that they work with. And what I've learned in my journey is a lot of my PTSD and the depression and anxiety that I have is because of people and how people have treated me in certain situations. Now, I know we've all dealt with stuff that we can look back on and be like, yeah, that was horrible. But some of the things that were done to me were just not justified. They were unnecessary, and it really did play a huge role in my mental health issues. So if you're the boss that is in here, not saying specifically, but if you are a leader or a boss, I'd say boss, because we're going to talk about that in just a second. If you're a boss that is making it so people have to leave the job that they love, stop that. Please. We have so many passionate people out there that are doing this job. They go to work every day. They love what they do as a job, but their boss is making it extremely difficult. And that goes both ways, right? If you're the employee that's making things difficult for your boss, you need to stop that too. You know, things are really tough right now for so many reasons, but just keep in mind as we go through this presentation, I'm going to share some cool stuff with you. You're going to learn a lot about yourselves first, and then you're going to learn about the people that surround you. Now, as I said earlier, this whole virtual thing, I'm not sure how my timing is going to end up at this beginning of this session, end of the session. I'm not 100% sure. But what I do know is I'm going to get to a certain point, and then I'm going to give you guys some homework for tomorrow's session. All right. So one of the things that I did is, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it in just a little bit, but I crossed paths with someone who I was destined to cross paths with. And I say destined because I learned through him that my story is already written. And I keep trying to steal the pen. So as long as I can have more of an open understanding that my story is already written, I can better accept the things that have happened and that currently happen. But what I learned from him, and I think that it is really important, is what matters most to each person when they're dealing with somebody else is, can you answer these questions? So I would ask to one of you, do you care about me? Can you help me? And can I trust you? And trust is such an important piece of human behavior and building relationships and allowing for growth. Now, honestly, you don't have to like everybody you work with. I promise you that. But what you do need to do is build these three things. We need to build on these three things. Do you care about me? If you're a boss or a coworker that could care less about the people you work for, that's your business. However, to make things a lot easier for you, you need to have these things available to them. Even if it's hard, you got to show them you care about them, especially as a leader. Can you help me? A lot of times, those that are helpers help everybody else. And there's a difference between answering the question, can you help me, in a selfish way, like what can you do for me, versus can you help me level up? Can you support me and making me a better telecommunicator or making me a better supervisor? And then, can I trust you? Trust, I can't even tell you, once the trust that I had from my boss previously to the incident that changed everything, once that trust was gone, that was it. I was done. There was no putting the toothpaste back in the tube. He lost my trust that day, and then his behavior ultimately destroyed it. There was no chance of getting that back. And then at some point you have to ask yourself, is this worth it, right? Is it worth it staying here? Or can I make, is it worth it, and can I make changes in relationships to make it better for all of us? And I think a lot of people just think that it is what it is and there's nothing I can do to change it. And I can assure you that is not the case. And you're going to learn about that through this session. So which team are you on? When we look at teams, okay? So on, I think the right side, left side, I don't know. The people on to the left of the middle of the screen, those folks are very standoffish. They're kind of in a league of their own. They're not really paying attention to the people that are, beside them. And then the folks on the right side of the screen, they're all buddy-buddy. They're loving life. They're awesome. And, everybody cares for each other. And I know there are centers out there where there is great morale and folks do love working together. But I also know that there are centers out there where there is just this contention and difficulty between staff and leadership. And I hope that some of the things and the tools that I give you today will be able to bridge that, so you guys end up being more of the team in the middle, where the two come together. And yeah, you can have, your folks that don't necessarily like to be in the circle with everybody. But when it comes to being productive, when it comes to being supportive, when it comes to working as a team, as long as we know that we all have the same mission, then things truly can change. So leadership is so important. And when I talk about leadership, I'm talking about everybody in the center. Everyone. Not just the folks that wear the stripes, not just the folks that wear the white shirts, not just the folks that sit in the office, not just the folks that are classified as a supervisor or a director or a manager. I'm talking about every person in your center. So leadership, to me, one of the things that I didn't realize, and I'm going to share the story about how I met Gord in just a little bit, but I didn't realize how much I didn't know myself. I thought I knew myself pretty well. I had been with myself for quite quite a few years. I had shared every experience with myself, and I still didn't know myself like I probably should have a long time ago. So, leadership is a function of first knowing yourself and then having a vision that is well communicated. I'm sorry, folks, but the last thing we do well in communications is communicate. And then building that trust among your colleagues, taking effective action to realize your own leadership potential. Many of the folks in here and across the country are taking leadership upon leadership upon leadership classes. One of the things that made me sad was, well, there was a lot of things that made me sad when I left the 911 center, but one of the biggest things that made me sad when I left the 911 center was in August of 2016, I had started the process of taking the National Academy Comm Center Manager class. I'd won a scholarship. I was very excited. And how that leadership class worked was you did 6 weeks online, you got to know folks, you did some assignments, and then you went and you were on site for a week with 25, maybe 30 911 professionals. And then you went back and you did 6 more weeks, and then you came back for another week, and at the end you graduated. Well, there were 2 things that happened for me there. 2 major things, 2 life-changing things. But the problem is I was at the end of my career in the 911 center, and I had chose to go to this leadership class hoping that I was going to get that sign to tell me that no, you can make things better where you are, and to stay there and take these tools that you learned and put them in place. And I learned so many things at CCM, and I met so many amazing people. But what ultimately happened is, I remember it like it was yesterday, between the first week on site and the second on site week, I quit my job. So here I am in this program for the town of Rochester. And when we get back to the on-site session in Colorado Springs, they asked, so anybody go back and make any major changes from what they learned last week? And I'm like, yep, I quit my job. And everybody was blown away, but they knew why, and they knew that it was important and it was time. But one of the things that really bummed me out was in the CCM class, we did something called a 360 evaluation. And now there's tons of 360 evaluations out there, but this one by far took the cake of all the ones that I saw. Basically what it was is I had to give this link to a handful of people. I had to give it to my current boss, no longer the asshat, he had already left. I had to give it to my peers. So in my case, it was the police chief, the fire chief, the highway surveyor, which by the way was my husband, so he better have given me good marks, and the emergency management director and the facilities manager. So those were my peers that were on the same level as me. And then I had to give it to my subordinates, the folks that that worked for me in that sense, right? That worked under my direction. And here I am going through life thinking, I'm a pretty good boss. I do a lot of really good things. I take care of them. I check on them when they've had a bad call. I do nice things for them for Telecommunicator Week. So I'm going to pass this thing with flying colors. Well, the problem is it wasn't a test. And I got a lot of feedback from that 360. And part of me was happy that I was leaving because I was really angry with some of the stuff that my folks had said about me. But then the other piece was very sad because I saw broken pieces of my leadership that I had blind spots for, that I didn't realize I was doing. So with that, I highly recommend you giving your folks a 360 review opportunity to find those blind spots. If you look at the title of the class, if they're the problem, why do I have to change? I spent lots of nights home. I spent lots of nights home from recently, but I spent lots of nights at home crying myself to sleep, frustrated, yelling at my kids, stressed out to the max, and I was blaming my people. It was their fault. So-and-so did this, so-and-so did that, so-and-so did that. And there wasn't a whole lot of times that I would look back at myself and go, how did I create this problem? How did I do that? So the thing that made me sad was I didn't have the opportunity to fix the things that were my blind spots. And as simple as it is, just one of the things that was so simple that I could have fixed was a few folks said I micromanaged things. Well, I didn't feel like I micromanaged them. I felt like I was passionate about what I did, and I wanted to make sure that they did it right, you know, the way I would do it. And when those things were pointed out to me, I realized that my way may not always be the right way. And if at the end of the day, they got to the same result just a little bit differently, that it was okay. And they didn't have to say everything the way that I did. They didn't have to document everything the way that I did. And I think that's something we forget along the way. So I learned a lot from there. And the second thing I learned about at CCM was EMDR. And that EMDR was life-saving for me. And then the third thing I learned about there was the DISC behavior assessment. And a lot of people think it's a personality test. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. But all of those things brought together is the reason for this class. Now, back then, I didn't even touch any of those things. Didn't even touch them. It took almost 2 years before I pulled those tools out of the toolbox and used them to make things better in my life. So I wasn't pulling my own hair. Now, we'll get to that in a few minutes too. So my question for you is, I want you to watch this little video. I don't know why there's a weird speaker there, but that's how it came up. I want you to watch this video and ask yourself, even if you're not in leadership, even if you're not a director, you're not a supervisor, I want you to watch this video and I want you to figure out, are you a boss or are you a leader? If you have the opportunity to be a leader in any situation, which is many throughout the day, how are you doing that? Are you being a boss or are you being a leader?
Tracy, we can't hear your.
It's okay. It's just stupid music. All right, I'll keep that in mind. I'm not sure why you wouldn't be able to hear, but it was just obnoxious, like 70s music. So it was more of the pictures on the screen. Thank you, though. I don't think I have anything else that has audio, so that's cool. Tomorrow I might, though. So when you ask yourself, are you a boss or a leader? I know that there was times that I would always consider myself. If you asked me today, you know, are you a boss or a leader? All day long, I would say I'm a leader. But then when I watch that video and I go back to my days in the center, there were times that I was a boss, that I was worried about numbers and I was worried about, you know, how things were getting done versus why they were getting done. And I wasn't empowering my people to step up and lead. So if I could go back in time, I would make those changes because I want folks to feel empowered. and not to feel like they're, if somebody wants to move up or somebody wants to be mentored, unfortunately, so many people feel that if you are a good leader, even if you are a good leader and you're a good leader, but you're not lifting your folks up and you're not empowering them, there's sometimes a wonder, are you afraid that they're going to outshine you? Or are you afraid they're going to know more than you? By all means, I would rather my staff had known more than me. Then I wouldn't get as many phone calls as I did in the middle of the night when something was going sideways. So definitely want to look back on how you're leading your people. Are you leading by example? Are you leading by force? And then that fear thing, oh boy, yeah, my boss, he invoked some serious fear. So when you think about the actions that you're making, stop and ask yourself, am I being a boss or am I being a leader? Am I micromanaging for absolutely no reason whatsoever? Is it okay if they didn't do this way, but they got the same result? I know some of us get pretty set in our ways, and we're going to talk about that too in just a little bit. But sometimes when we can let go a little bit and start to not have to have control over everything, it makes our lives a lot easier. And when I took this 360 and I got this, I was hurt with some of the things that were said, but that's what I reacted before responding. And I have a slide on that as well, but I am quick to react emotionally. And then I go back and I take a pause and I look back at the situation and ask what I can learn from it. I'm getting better at seeing how I can learn from things versus reacting emotionally. But that's in my DNA. So sometimes it's hard not to do. So when we talk about personality and character and behavior, one of the things that I firmly believe now is, I had to go through everything I went through to be sitting here in front of you right now and to have built the relationships that I have with all of you amazing people. Because if I didn't, then I wouldn't be able to share the information that I learned, nor would I have even wanted to dig deeper to learn more about it. So many of you know that I work for Rapid SOS. Many of you know that I was the first person on the public safety team, and I had been there maybe a year, full-time by myself, traveling around the country, selling a free product that didn't exist yet, and hoping that it worked. And in that process, we grew very quickly. When I say we grew very quickly, in 4 years, so let's say I was number 17, we're at almost 130 people now at this point. And what I learned was there are a lot of data-driven, task-resulted, dependent folks, but I didn't know exactly what that meant. And if you remember, I said that back in 2016, I learned about the DISC profile way back then, but it didn't stick. I didn't put the effort into learning it to the extent and getting the certifications that I have in it now, because it really didn't fit at the moment. But as our team started to grow, there were personalities that I wasn't able to click with. And I couldn't figure out why, because I get along with everybody and I love everybody. And I couldn't figure out where these little nuances were that were causing some, anxiety or difficulty. A lot of it was in my head, but it was important for me to learn that there were other types of people. And I shared this the other day on my Facebook page, and many of you probably saw it, is that a lot of times we expect ourselves in other people. And we need to stop doing that. Period. Boom. Done. From this day forward, do not ever expect you from anybody else, because there is a very high likelihood that there is only one you. And you are the only one that is going to act the way that you act in situations. So as I was at this place, I was struggling, and because I am what is an I personality, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. And I personalities, they want to be liked. They want to be liked. They want everybody to love them. They want to be the center of attention. They want to be where the party is. I know that comes as a shock to many of you, but nonetheless, I couldn't figure out where I was going wrong. And in my mind, they were the problem. Because if they didn't like me, clearly that's their problem. But that wasn't the case at all. And it had nothing to do with like or dislike. It had to do with who we all were. And I am so blessed that during that time, our public safety, the person that oversaw the public safety team at that time brought in a coach, a personal coach. His name was Gord McFarland from Coaching to Connect. And prior to him coming in to do this training for our team at the beginning of the year, to kick off the team, to get everybody, because he knew the team grew quickly and how many different people and personalities there were on the team. I can assure you that I, letter I, and personal I am the only one on my team that has the personality that I do. And that's weird. That doesn't happen in many places. So with that, we took the DISC assessment. It's not a test, it's an assessment. We took the assessment, and then we went to this presentation, and I was blown away. And I was so connected. But one of the things that I learned about was the differences in personality and character. So first, personality is who you are, okay? And then character is what you do with who you are. So I'm me, and I act a certain way, or I do things a certain way, or I've learned things a certain way. So personality is a combination of characteristics or qualities that form a distinct individual character. And then there's behavior. The way in which someone acts or conducts themselves, especially towards others. Now, to me, I always thought I am who I am. And if you don't like it, tough. Well, that mentality didn't get me a lot of good results in certain situations. And this isn't just working with folks that I didn't know. This is in life in general. So this isn't just about work. This is about family. This is about friends. This is about the man at the grocery store or the person in line at Dunkin' Donuts or Starbucks. The behavior is often learned. So when you take behavior, you take character, and you take personality, and you put them all together, who are you? And that's what makes us unique. That's what makes all of us unique. You're going to see these colors popping up, and each one of them is a different type of behavior. Okay? So what does it matter? What does communication, personality, and behavior have to do with anything? First, I mentioned before, I thought I knew myself. I so did not know myself, nor did I know that I was a lot for some people. I just thought if I'm kind to everybody, if I'm fun and upbeat, everybody's going to love me. And that is not the case. There are times where I'm too much. But just for the record, it's not your place to tell me that. You shouldn't be telling people they are too anything. That's not your place. That's what we have to learn on our own. When am I too anything? Am I too emotional? Am I too sensitive? Am I too caring? Am I too angry? Am I too direct? I needed to learn these things for myself before I could learn about others. And so what is really important here is when you take this information that I'm going to give you throughout the rest of today and tomorrow, you need to first learn about yourself. How do you build a foundation with relationships if you don't even know who you are? You then get to know your people. And I highly recommend, I'm going to give you a link where you can go ahead and get your own assessment and find out who you are. And then you want to bring it back to all the folks you work with and your family and everybody. And then you find out who they are. And then as soon as I start pointing out some of these behaviors and why folks do things, I mean, when I say that some of these things are spot on, it blows my mind that with just a few questions, this assessment, and it's free, I'm not selling you anything, don't worry. This assessment knows exactly who I am by just asking a couple of questions. And now if I take what I know about myself and what I know about others, I can put that into building a better team. I'm all about hitting the reset button. If things aren't great right now, taking information that you learned, why are you here? Why did you sign up for the TINA conference? Why are you sitting in the session with me? Why do you want to hear the things that we have to talk about? Because hopefully you're going to take some of this stuff and you're going to plop it right back down in your center. And I wouldn't recommend saying, I'm going to do a personality test and you people are all going to start to behave a little bit differently. It truly is getting to know yourself, each other, and building a better team. I'm going to share some stuff with you that I've learned along the way, and boy, was it extremely helpful. So what are some of the things that we need to know about how to connect with people? People need to know that they're needed. I think sometimes we forget to tell the people that are around us, and especially in the 911 center, that we need you. And I end every one of my new podcasts, which I'll tell you about at the end of the presentation, with, we need you. There are so many good folks out there that are being destroyed physically, mentally, and emotionally because of this profession and because of the people that are leading them. Let's take a step back and figure out a way on how we can better elevate our folks. And it first has to start with telling them they're needed. People need to know they are needed, okay? So I need to be needed. That is in my DNA. I need to be needed. But I also need to know from you as a supervisor, as my boss, as my director, as my coworker, I need to know you need me. People need to know that they have helped. I know with quality assurance, that was one of the things that I got dinged on during my 360 assessment. And I was very proud of my EMD program. I love the fact that my dispatchers nailed it. But I did it in a way, and I built their ability to do the job in a way that I regret. I spent more time pointing out the things they did wrong than pointing out the things they did right. And with that, it wasn't intentional. It was an error of ignorance, not intention. I can assure you that. It was more that I just didn't want them to make that mistake again. And if something wasn't the way that it was supposed to, I had to tell them, right? I didn't. Because in that moment, they may not have asked a certain question a certain way, but I don't need to nitpick every single solitary thing they did. Because when my employee walks out of their quality assurance review feeling deflated and feeling worthless and feeling like they didn't even help one single person because I assume they know they did a good job other than the things I pointed out, I was wrong. People want to be seen in the light of their true potential. I am an extroverted people person. And then my second trait is I am an introverted people person. So what is the common denominator? At the end of the day, I am a people person. So put me in a role that is going to allow me to shine in my true potential. And that took a little while to get here at Rabbit SOS. I am totally shining in the light of my true potential. They gave me a talk show. Yep. That is seeing and putting somebody where they belong in the light of their true potential. Where didn't I belong? Tracking things and keeping track of lists and entering data and stuff like that. No, that's icky to me. I don't like that. It's boring. But guess what? There's folks out there that love data. They love keeping track of things. They love making lists. Me, not so much. So putting your people where they belong based on who they are moves mountains. And then give people a reputation to uphold. Ask yourself this question. If my folks were sitting in the training class with me right now in Tennessee, in Murfreesboro, you know, before we went out to the Grove tonight and had some drinks, if you all were sitting in my session and I asked every one of you, tell me what your center's like, what are they going to tell me? Are they going to tell me I have a boss that micromanages everything? Are they going to tell me that things are amazing here and we have a great boss who is extremely supportive? Live up to the reputation that you want to be told outside of your center. It's really important. And then there's emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is going to play a key role in the second half of this session. So the emotional intelligence piece is something that a lot of people have heard about, but they haven't put the time into learning about it. If I asked a general person walking by, what do you think emotional intelligence is? They'd probably just randomly say, well, I think it's, I know how somebody's feeling. And that's just part of it. So these two little definitions right here, they really captured the essence of emotional intelligence for me. The ability to understand your emotions and then respond to them effectively. And then the measure of an individual's abilities to recognize and manage their emotions and the emotions of other people, both individually and in groups. And I remember, I don't know, 10 years ago now, I went to a therapist and I asked my mom to go with me. My mom and I did not have the best relationship, and there's a lot of history there, whatever, yada, yada. But we got into a pretty big fight in Florida on vacation. And I didn't talk to her for about a month. And that bothered me because I'm a people person and I don't want to be mad at my mom, but I knew she was never going to apologize for what she did. And I remember reaching out and asking her if she would go to a therapist with me. And the therapist said to me, I'm going to meet with your mom, then I'm going to meet with you, and then I'm going to meet with you guys together. Well, the first meeting she had with my mom wasn't impressed because they asked if she was suicidal, homicidal. My mom got all mad. But she only went to 2 sessions. And then on the third one, she said, I'm not going. And I said, why aren't you going? And she said, because I feel like that lady is making this all my fault. Everything's my fault. And I said, no, she's just explaining what's happening. And she said, I'm not going. So I went back to the therapist that day and I said, my mom's not coming. And the therapist asked me this very specific question. And it changed my life and how I viewed my mom and how I had my relationship with my mom. The therapist said, why did you come here? What did you want by coming here with your mom? And I said, well, sadly, if God forbid she passed tomorrow, I don't know if I'd be crying for the right reasons. And she said, but what did you want to happen? And I said, I wanted her to change. And that therapist said to me, she will never change. She is who she is. You have to change. You have to change how you behave, and eventually she will be changing how she treats you. And then my response was, but if she sucks, why do I have to change? I don't suck. She sucks. She said, do me a favor and try it. I can assure you that at the next family gathering, when my mother came into the room of me and about 6 of my 10 siblings and my dad and spouses, and we were all sitting there, and she walked into the room and she said, can you tell me what feisty means? And I don't know what she meant by that or where it was going, but I knew I wasn't touching it with a 10-foot pole. And all the other people in the room responded with negative definitions. It means you're going to argue about everything. It means you always have something to say. It means you're going to get the last word. It means it's your way or the highway. And as my siblings and my dad were throwing out these definitions, I sat there quietly. I changed my behavior. Because before I would have participated in the shenanigans, not knowing where it was going to lead to. But in this particular case, I sat there quietly and I didn't say a word. And before I knew it, my mom was standing in front of me, pointing at me, telling me I was feisty and that I always had to have the last word and I always had to have an opinion. And instead of me reacting and flipping out and wanting to know why did she just come at me when I did not say one word, I just said, you're right, I'm feisty. And that was it. I didn't say another word and she got upset. She said, great, now you will, be all upset, not talk to me, blah, 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 blah. And before I would have reacted and I would have left and I would have been upset with my mom for quite a while, but I wasn't that time. And I stayed and she walked out into the kitchen, started doing the dishes. I started washing the dishes with her. I went to leave. I gave her a hug and a kiss. I said, bye. I walk out of the house. My husband looks at me like, what the hell just happened? And each time I did that, each time I changed how I behaved in that situation, my mom started to change too. We always say that you can't change other people. You can. You can change how other people behave and act towards you by changing how you behave and act towards them. And over time, it happens. I promise. I'm not making stuff up. It works. So when you look at the picture behind this emotional intelligence, there's very specifically a brain and a heart. What side do you think the emotional intelligence lives on? The heart. We know that the analytical folks, we know that the folks that are task and results driven, they live in their brain. And those of us that are on the people side live in our hearts. To be emotionally intelligent, you have to live more in your heart. It's a given. You cannot be emotionally intelligent and only live in your brain. We'll explain more of that. So what are some of the impacts of emotional intelligence? Some of the things that impact emotional intelligence is first DNA, okay? Our DNA dictates a lot of who we are. Then, what is our family like? What was our upbringing like? Did you come from a family that was supportive and loving and caring, or did you come from a family that was not? What is your environment like? Where do you live? Who do you live around? Who do you surround yourself with? And then what is your history? Do you have a history of trauma, being treated poorly, child abuse, adult abuse? All of those things affect your ability to be emotionally intelligent. The worst thing you can do is if you were hurt is to hurt other people. There is a saying, hurting people hurt people. And I've met a lot of those people. And a lot of those people hurt me. So knowing that you have some of these risk factors sitting behind you means you need to be a little bit more aware of your emotional intelligence. So what are some of the benefits of high emotional intelligence? So first, self-awareness. I knew I was emotionally intelligent because I could connect with folks on a very personal level most of the time. But what I learned through the DISC assessment, which is going to be a decent part of the second part of this session, is that self-awareness piece. knowing where my behavior and my personality would cause things to backfire on me. Those that have high EI are empathetic. They can see how something's affecting somebody emotionally. They can read body language, they can understand. High EI motivates people to be better. It allows for self-regulation and better social skills. There are lots of folks that don't want to be around other people. They're introverts. We'll learn about those types of behaviors later. But there are times that you need to jump out there, right? You need to put yourself out there.
Tracy, it's Matt. I'm just letting you know about 5 minutes.
All right, perfect, because I'll end right where I need to. Thank you.
Thank you.
So how do you increase your emotional intelligence? First, observe how others react to you. Are they saying things like, you talk too much? Are they saying things like, oh, here she goes, talking about herself again? Are they saying things that when they're said to you, they sting? And when they say them to you and they sting, ask yourself, are they saying it for them or are they saying it to hurt me? But then, is it true? Look at your work environment. Do a self-assessment on yourself. Examine how you react to stressful situations. Examine how your actions affect others. And then take responsibility. That was the best thing I ever did. I talked a lot. I overtook conversations a lot. I put my 2 cents in a lot. But what folks don't know about me is I didn't do those things to one up folks. I did them to connect with people. And there's the difference. So when we know who somebody is and why they're doing something, doesn't it make it a little bit easier to tolerate and understand? I think so. And being able to learn how to react versus respond. Are you reacting in an emotional, in a negative way, or are you pausing and responding to whatever that situation is? Either way, I'm going to leave you with this, and then we're going to pick up again tomorrow. When I met Gord McFarland, I was struggling. I was struggling not just with a couple of folks that were at work that were strong personalities that I was trying to navigate through, but there were people in my life that I had that issue with too. Why couldn't I handle these strong personalities? What was the problem? There was no problem, but Gord said this in the session. People don't do things to you. They do them for themselves. You just get in the way. Let me say that again, okay? People don't do things to you. They do them for themselves. You just get in the way. And then obviously, something people don't know is that people are different. They are predictably different. So I'm going to leave this here for a second. And I want you to write down that website, take a screenshot, picture. You guys are savvy. And before you come back tomorrow, I would love for you to do that assessment because it's going to make understanding yourself a lot easier when we come back together tomorrow morning. So there we go. That's the first section. Buckle up for the second one. Anybody have any questions?
You had a comment earlier from Joyce at the beginning of the presentation, and she said, admin that want to hire people just to have bodies in the seats when they state they don't have confidence in who they hired, but they hire them anyway. Cycle of bad decision making and no understanding takes its toll.
100%. 100%. And there's nothing that deflates a good employee more than tolerating a bad one. And I think sometimes they forget to look at that. And that's why I'm saying it's so important to start looking at yourself and make sure that you're checking yourself before you wreck yourself.
Awesome. Anybody else for Tracy?
right. You will all have my contact information at the end of, I don't know, I think I got like 4 presentations. So, but definitely if you have a few minutes between the classes before tomorrow, take that quick little assessment, because a lot of the stuff that I'm going to share tomorrow, we'll do a little test if you don't get to do it, just to kind of put you in the right box. But I'm going to share some stuff that is going to be life-changing for some tomorrow, and then some others it may take a little while for it to sink in, like it did with me, but it was for sure life-changing.
Awesome. Thank you, Tracy.
All right. Thanks, guys. I appreciate you. Stay healthy, stay safe, and I'll see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Hey,
Kim,
Matthew.
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say, the person that got this gift card's on Audrey Mullins from the city of Kingsport.
Awesome. Audrey Mullins from City of Kingsport wins the gift